Welcome to the Misfit Squad podcast,
where we invite you to embrace your difference and to discover a spectrum of possibilities and change what's wrong about you into what is strong about you.
Hey guys, welcome to the Misfit Squad. This week we're talking about horses, healing, and energy. And we're basically going to talk about what do horses know about healing and what does energy have to do with that. And basically Kim's going to talk a little bit about what she does in terms of like equine therapy. And, you know, we've had the last few podcasts, if you guys have been listening to them, and if you haven't, you can go back and listen. We talked about proprioception. And then the show before that, I do believe we had Kate on regarding equine stuff. And she talked about horses and using them to increase like leadership. So today we're going to basically talk about the body and how the body works with horses and energy.
Yep. So, I mean, basically some of this comes, I'm sure some of you are like, oh my God, what is the deal with this equine healing, this equine therapy? Like, it a little bit sometimes seems like what's the word?
The thing to do.
The something du jour, you know? So, but there's a reason that it has become so popular, particularly for people on the spectrum or for kids or people that are struggling and having challenges with their body and everything, right?
Yeah, or with sensory processing difficulties.
Issues, right.
Yeah.
It's especially good for people with sensory processing issues. And that really has a lot to do with two main things. Number one, it's the energy that horses are and how they be in the world. And I will come back to that. And then number two is the way that the horse's body moves, how it impacts our proprioceptive system. In a way that honestly, I mean, I've done a lot of physical activities in my life. And I mean, I'm not sure what else I would pick that was really similar or does much.
For all of you listeners who do not know, Kim used to live in Hawaii, so she did surfing. So she could talk about her body on a surfboard and how that differs between working with a horse.
True. So to get back to the energy that horses be, you guys have heard us. If you've listened to almost any one of our podcasts, you hear us talk a lot about being more space. And then it's like, well, what is that? What does that mean? And so, but that is actually one of the things that horses are really brilliant at, right? The energy that they be, like the way that they just exist, they're not like doing anything special, right? It's just like who they are and how they function on this planet is a space that creates ease for people in their bodies. And I've been thinking about this, trying to think about ways to like describe it in such a way that people can get, you know, and even people who don't think of themselves as sensitive or they don't think they're aware of energy or whatever. And so if you imagine someone like really on the spectrum and someone who really has a lot of, or not on the spectrum, but someone who just really has a lot of sensory processing issues.
Which would be like, you know, they get overloaded with hearing too much, like
exactly. And that's exactly my example. So we have every single one of you have walked into a room or a space or a place where it's like really frenetic and there's like a lot of people or there's like a lot of noise or there's like a lot of visual like things, you know, coming in. And for someone who has sensory processing issues, imagine that turned up to 2,000 volume and imagine how that would feel in your body. That's like the closest thing I could think of to like, for me, when I walk into a loud room or someone's being really loud, that's what it's like. It's like, I mean, honestly, it wouldn't feel that different if everyone in the room just came up and started hitting me with baseball bats. I mean, like, it kind of feels like that, right? Like I feel like I'm being assaulted sometimes.
It is super, when it's overwhelming and overloading to your body, to the way your body senses it, it's super intrusive. And everybody's is different. Some people is a combination, but there can be the auditory overload, like Kim is talking about. There can be the visual, where it's like way too many differences in lights, colors, however that may show up. Like even touch. We've talked about that many times, like either needing to touch everything or like totally when you're being touched, it's like way too much. So it's all of that put together is what we're talking about.
Right. So when we talk about being space, and Trina has talked about this a lot, about what she does especially when she's doing her OT work, her occupational therapy work with her nonverbal clients in particular, but with all of them. When we talk about being space, it's like we are able to take that room that you walked into that was really loud or really crowded and like pull the walls out so that it's the size of a few football stadiums. And what that does is it spreads that noise and that visual overwhelm out and helps make it less overwhelming. Right? It's like taking the little bit of water that's in a tiny bucket and suddenly it's in a giant bucket. It doesn't seem like very much water anymore.
Yeah, it's diffusing it out.
Yeah, diffusing it, exactly. So, for me, when I'm with horses, that is just automatically what they do. They create more space to dissipate and diffuse the noise and the drama and the trauma and the overwhelm and the sensory input, the sensory inputs that are too much. So that's one of the main reasons I think that people find so much benefit from any sort of hippotherapy or equine assisted learning or just riding, for people who, I mean, honestly, because sometimes I just teach riding. I'm not always, facilitating people and really specifically doing like equine assisted learning. But just the people who come for riding tell me the benefits that they get. And it's the same sort of thing, walking around, the way that your body moves and rocks in relation to the way that the horse's body moves and where the horse's body is touching you and how it moves your body bilaterally, I guess is the word, right? Like,
well, it creates like almost like a rhythmic movement to some degree.
Yes, it is a rhythmic movement.
Which that alone is like when your sensory system is out of whack or just high anxiety or depression, those kinds of things, your natural rhythms of your body get out of whack. And so when you can be on a horse and you are with the energy and the being of that horse, that is one of the things it helps create. It helps reestablish that rhythmic patterns within the body.
Right. And then the other thing that's really cool is that, they're a beautiful, large, giant, majestic animal, and that you can really feel supported physically just because they're big, they can hold you. And so the only other thing that I've done that requires like each limb doing something different is playing the drums, right? Usually you got your left foot, your right foot, everything's doing something slightly different when you play the drums. And horseback riding is similar because of the way that we ride and the way that the horse's body moves on a diagonal. And so it allows the person on the horse to like tune in to the different parts and sides of their body and get information about that, which is one way to reintegrate, sort of.
Yeah.
Is there another way to say that, Trina?
No, I would, like, if we're talking in terms of like what we were talking about, the sensory processing, a lot of times there's difficulties with like the bilateral coordination, which is coordinating both sides of your body, and also contralateral movement, which is, if I'm saying it right, like moving your right arm in conjunction with like your left foot and vice versa, diagonally across your body.
Yes.
Or is that ipsilateral? I can't remember.
I don't know, but we do that a lot when we ride.
Right. So basically what we're getting at is that you're coordinating both sides of your body, but also your upper body and your lower body, as well as like diagonally across your body. So you're getting all of that to where you can actually begin, to those people who have a hard time feeling where their body is or knowing what their body is doing. They get all that input from the horse, and so it helps them begin to coordinate all those movements together. So you get better at, for instance, sports, playing basketball, even running, riding a bike, or even something like handwriting. That's hard. Or
just like general coordination. Anything that requires any sort of like physical coordination is going to get better. And
it's also awesome for like eye-hand coordination. So it helps with even reading, like where your eyes have to scan. So it's that's why it's really cool. It involves so many components.
Yeah. And the other thing that's really cool, actually, that just popped up into my head is that a very accomplished rider, a rider that's really enjoyable to watch ride, is actually really relaxed. They're physically relaxed. So I talk a lot about being like relaxed and ready, or relaxed and engaged. So it teaches you, because you also, they're big and they're scary for lots of people. So you do have to overcome a fear response, right? And that works you through a bunch of different like tensing sensations in your body. And so learning to be relaxed but ready to engage your muscles is actually a really good skill in learning to help you deal with stressful scenarios, right? Because like if you think about it, our whole point here is to not teach you how to avoid stressful scenarios. Our goal a little bit is to invite you to stressful scenarios and give you tools to be able to navigate through them, right? Because we can't avoid stressful scenarios in life. So how do we respond and move through the stressful scenario? And that relaxation, but active and attentive and ready that you get from being with a horse. And it doesn't have to be mounted, by the way. You can get this from just being with a horse. Mm-hmm. Actually has a lot of like additional stress management benefits that apply to lots of scenarios in your life, because you have to learn how to manage your breath, manage your muscle. Like you're really coordinating like a lot of systems in your body, and it that applies to so many other areas.
Well, it was really cool when you said relaxed yet engaged, because that's what happens a lot, especially when you have like high anxiety or high stress. You are not relaxed. Your body is constricted and usually tight. And so that's part of like what we've talked a lot also about, like getting out of defense mode. Because a lot of times you're like in a defense, it's just a mechanism that goes up. You're just in a defense mode where everything is like a fight or flight or like freeze moment. And so in order to get out of that, you do have to be in this more of a relaxed state, but you also have to be engaged in your environment.
Engaged, aware, alert.
All of the above, because when you are willing to be, we always talk a lot about being aware. When you're willing to be engaged, you're also aware. And that's like your greatest almost protection or defense that there is like your awareness of everything. But to have that immense awareness, you really have to be relaxed. And that's why we also talk all the time about being more space, because when you are more space, you can be more relaxed. You get out of that defense mode.
Yeah.
And that's the horses are like super aware of, like, if you walk up to a horse and you are in extreme chaos or extreme defense, they will know that. And what would
they will often mirror that behavior to you.
Yes.
Right. And I have, that's something I still regularly sort of like manage. There are certain horses I'm slightly afraid to handle and lead. They're big and whatever. And they have, you know, there's lots of points of view about them and how they're going to behave. And I have to consciously manage my breathing, my thought process, my body language. Usually I say things out loud too, usually to calm myself down, but also to calm them down too. Like, there are certain things that I have to really, like, if my adrenaline spikes, so does theirs.
Yes. So horses are like, that is like a whole component in self-regulation. Yeah. Because you have to be able to observe, like what Kim's talking about, your breath, like what's in your head, what's all the thoughts that are coming through. Those are the things that you do get out of defense mode and to self-regulate.
Right. And for me, like, I notice like it's another one is like, we don't, when we get in that defense that you talk about, we don't realize the tension that we carry in our body and in our muscles and how constricting that tension is.
Yeah. And
how much harder it makes things. Like, to use an example, I was struggling with something in my riding, and someone said to me, well, are you squeezing your butt muscles to do that? If you can relax your butt muscles and use your thighs. And I was like, oh, what? Huh? So then the next time I was riding, I was like consciously like, oh, I am totally squeezing my butt muscles. And how can I do this and not squeeze my butt muscles but not fall off? Because I had thought that was how I was holding myself on the horse, right? And now I can do that. And then a lot, like if I'm leading, sometimes I'll notice like I'm way up here, you know, like I'm like, you know, and I have to be like, you know, and like, so yeah, things like that.
And one other thing too, Kim mentioned about being aware of the thoughts in her head. And that's one of the really awesome things about horses as well. And the reason it's so great for those on the spectrum and all of us off the spectrum or whoever it may be, is we also have to be aware of how many thoughts we have going on in our head continually, because horses are intuitive and they pick that stuff up. And so, and like Kim said, they will mirror you. So it's going to show you what is happening, like what thoughts you have going. So like sometimes, well, what I've seen is a lot of kids who are nonverbal, who do immensely well with these horses because they can communicate with them in this like intuitive way and get them to do all these things because they don't have to use the words. It's all like up in their head through their thoughts. But it's also being aware, because like I've gotten on a horse before where like, yeah, it was a new horse. I was a little overwhelmed. It was a big horse and I was tense. And even though I was saying, go slow, it was going fast because that's my head was spinning. You know, I had so much going on. And as soon as I realized what I was doing and I became expanded out, like Kim did, like push the walls out. And I thought of myself like as a tree growing roots into the ground and like then the branches going up, the horse totally calmed down. But that's because I calmed down and I calmed down the thoughts in my head.
And I mean, I can go, you know, I'm currently at a ranch where we have over 100 horses. We have, you know, probably 60 different owners on that property with those horses. And I can tell you without fail, based on the horse's behavior, which owners have anxiety problems.
That's amazing.
I mean, yeah.
It's really cool. I mean, that's one of the things like for you guys, most of you, well, some of you may not know, like Temple Grandin, who has autism, but she's done a ton of work around horses and around animals. That's the one thing she always talks about is talking to animals and how that changed her entire perspective, because she is she thinks in pictures. She's one of those that does think in pictures. So she could send a picture to that horse and that horse completely communicates back the same way. So that's just another example.
Yeah. So those are all the sort of slightly more airy-fairy, energy, woohoo-y sort of things about horses that work. If we want to talk about like specific, to get back to the proprioceptive system, right?
Yes.
We did touch on it a little bit with how it affects the bilateral movement of the body and how you can feel, so there are lots of things that I'll do, but with a lot of the little kids, but I've done this with adults too, say like, okay, each gait that a horse has a different rhythm, a different beat, a different cadence, right? So when we walk, the walk is a 4-beat gait. And so we'll go and we'll count 1, 2, 3, and we say the number as they feel their foot touch the ground, right? So now your rider is feeling the horses. So because what happens, I don't know how, whatever. If you know about horses, this is like totally overkill. But basically the horse has to lift its leg through, which lifts its butt up, which rolls through your body, essentially, creating this like rhythm of movement. So you have to feel them lift their leg and then touch it down, and you feel that roll through your body. So there's a lot of proprioceptive information there. Where do I feel that on my butt? Where do I feel that on my leg? How does it feel when their leg touches the ground? And then to assign a loud verbal cue to that, to acknowledge. There's a lot of systems that we are engaging there to give them information about their body.
Yes.
Right? That it affects the various different sensory systems. So that's one I use a lot.
Well, it also helps with like the whole posturing and trunk control. Like somebody who has, for instance, more low tone throughout their body, their trunk, where you're not able to like keep yourself upright. Like we talked, I think last week in the show about proprioception. Like if you're constantly slumped over the desk or you have your hand on your face to prop yourself up, you have a more low tone. And so riding a horse, you have to be more erect. So you are actually activating all those core muscles, which allows you to feel where you are too. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it makes me laugh because there are people that I know well who come and ride with me. And I'm like, what are you doing with your body? Like there are people that like, I know are active and do sporty things and, that you would think would have like good like management of their muscular system. And they're doing weird like wiggly stuff with their I'm always like, what are you doing? What is happening there? There is a middle here. These muscles are supposed to do something. What's happening? I have some little kids that look like some crazy wiggle worm. I'm like, what's happening? What's happening here?
But that's what we're talking about is the proprioception and that whole core strength and knowing where your body is in connection with the horse's body, in connection with the ground.
Yeah. So, there's so many different things. I use a lot of ACE bandages that I'll wrap around the upper body because it just gives just very mild pressure so that they can feel where their body is in space better. It's amazing. The kids are always like, what are you doing to me? And I'm like, you watch. And I do it one time. And then for weeks later, the benefit of that 1 half-hour lesson riding with the ACE bandages on their upper body carries out into the riding for weeks. And then sometimes we have to redo it because they forget or whatever.
No, but that is actually huge. I remember like when I did therapy years ago with like more infants that had difficulty getting on all fours. or crawling or doing tummy time, we would actually ace bandage like their legs. And then we'd actually take them and move them through the motion of crawling, because then they could actually connect what we're talking about, all that together. When you move your left arm, your right leg moves, and vice versa. That we use the ace bandages to get them to know. So it's actually really cool, because it does give you that input into your body. And then you're like, oh, there is a muscle there, or there is a body part there that I wasn't aware of.
Because realistically, we've never really been taught. Well, you and I just basically stumbled on it because we've been always curious in life, right? But I was never really taught to be aware of my body. I was never really taught anything about my body, really, you know? And so, and I think most people would consider me exceptionally aware of my body and what it's doing and what information it's giving me or whatever, you know, but most people aren't. Like, people just really, kids especially, they just really don't know that they're not moving. I'm like, move your right leg. Move your right leg. And they're like, I am. I'm like, no, you're not. You know? So, I mean, so when I work with people, I do a lot more of that than I think some people do, because I really spend a lot of time showing their body and talking with them with my hands and helping them engage the muscles and move. And, you know, so we use the ace bandages. I use the TheraBands for different stuff.
What do you do for somebody who is holding onto the harness, or like, you know, to get the horse to turn a certain direction, like knowing how much resistance they have to use or not use?
That one's a little bit, it depends on the horse and the rider. Because I'm constantly balancing, it seems like it's either end of the spectrum. Either they're just basically literally can't do anything, they can't pull, or they're like being really harsh. So there's also a finesse there that I'm trying to teach in a feel. I do a lot of pressing on their leg when I tell them, put your leg on. Horses are into pressure animals, meaning typically their natural reaction is to press into pressure, and we actually train them to move away from pressure. That's part of the training process. So when you ask a horse to do something, you do it in such a way that they're meant to move away from what you're asking. So if you want to go to the right, you pull on your right rein to tip their nose to the right, so they're like looking that way, and then you press with your left leg. So they move away from your left leg, and you pointed their nose to the right, so they go to the right. Right? So it's also like an exercise in opposites, right? Because you're doing a lot of opposite to get them to do things. So so I will press on their leg so that they can feel like how hard I'm pressing, because then when I press on their leg, the horse will move over. Right. So then they can feel that, right? So I do a lot of faking it until you can make it. So like I'll pull on the rein and I'll walk in front of the horse and I'll have them start and stop. The horse is really starting and stopping because I'm starting and stopping, but it tricks the rider to think they're doing it, and it tricks the horse to think the rider is doing it, so that after a little bit, they can actually do it on their own.
Well, what is that? One more, because it's about time to wrap up. But, you know, one time you were talking about like kids who are on a horse and they have a hard time getting the horse to go.
Yes. All right. So I do have one exercise that I do. And that it comes back around to where we started the show with, which is about being space. So, and this applies, again, you can use this to get your horse to move, but this applies in other areas of life outside of riding. But I basically have the kids breathe in and exhale. And then if you can feel there's a little more space there. Then they breathe in, and now as they exhale, they imagine themselves inside of a giant bubble, right? So we make a bubble around them and the horse, so bigger than them and the horse. And what that automatically does is it changes the body posture. It makes the body posture up. It brings their energy up. And 9 times out of 10, if they've really done that, when they squeeze with their legs and ask the horse to go, it will walk.
But that's a combination of everything we talked about. It is being more space. It is being aware of your body, being more erect, increasing those core muscles, activating your legs. And it's also the cognitive thing of like, hey, we need to move forward here.
Right. And that is a signal, that is an energetic signal to the horse that you are willing to be the leader. Because that's really the other, probably number one lesson in being with horses, is it teaches you how to be the leader. Because what you have, well, my interesting point of view, what you have with the horse is a partnership, right? You're not dominating them. They're not dominating you. Them trying to dominate you is unsafe, right? So it's a partnership. But the horses, because of their fight, flight, and freeze genetics, they need a leader. So they need you to be there with them, to be present, and to be willing to lead. That makes them feel safe. It allows them to trust and do what you're asking. And that applies to that applies to a business meeting or to managing a sales team or whatever, so it's all of those things in a super simple sounds ridiculous exercise.
So that's why horses are so amazing with like proprioception and being aware of the body, but healing and also being aware of the energy and all the sensations. So I'm sure we will do more on that in the future. But anyway, have fun listening, and we will see you next week. And if you guys would go onto YouTube and give us a review, a 5-star review, we would completely appreciate it.
Yep, subscribe to our channel. You can go to the energeticsignatureformula.com or yourbodyyourbuddy.com. That's it, right? Yeah.
Ismybodymybuddy.com.
Yeah, and we've got some freebies there. Anyways, check the show notes. The right links will be in the show notes. All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Okay. Thank you for listening to the show.
Our target is to make your awareness easy to use and to acknowledge the power of not fitting in.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and share it with someone you know.
Why fit in when you were born to stand out?
Embrace your difference. Join the Misfit Squad.